Thank you very much, Susan, for that beautiful music. It's great to be back with everybody here for 2 weeks in a row. Wow, I'm lucky and I'm blessed, and I just feel the goodness in my own life by the fact that you keep inviting me back to share my thoughts with you. Welcome to everybody here in the room. Welcome to everybody who is online and who may be watching this later on the video. I just appreciate that. I know you got a lot of choices in life, and to choose to be with us, it's just a wonderful blessing for us as well, and hope that you find this meaningful this morning. Just one programming note for those of you who are in the room. This is the 1st of May, first Sunday in May, as Susan indicated, and before her music. And this is the Sunday of the week that CSL Denver has instituted a recent process of holding a short meditation and group discussions after the service. So I invite you to stay afterwards for a little few minutes of meditation and just sharing what's on your mind, questions about science of mind, anything that you wish to discuss. And I look forward to that conversation. That's the kind of juicy stuff that I think is really fun to get into, and want to hear what's on your mind. As Susan indicated, our theme this month, we are looking at going from good to great to grand. All of the talks this month will be looking at that particular message, and in today's message, it's really about living an actualized life. But let's start off by acknowledging at the very beginning of this series, and this first talk in the series, is that when we talk about going from good to grand to great, there's an assumption we're already at good. And so we've got to be mindful that at different points in our life, we can be at less than what we might call good. That there may be moments or aspects of our life that we may be less than good. And so we have to sort of put that out there so we can say, let's got to get up to a baseline of good so we can move to the great and grand levels of our life. We might say, how could I live an actualized life when I don't feel like I have an actual life right now? I'm going through so much stuff, and we have to process that. So no matter what's going on in your life, if you feel there's areas of your life that are less than good, I think that you'll find content in this message and in the messages this month that will help you in moving to the state of goodness so you can move and evolve to the higher levels of greatness and grandness with your individual life. So living an individualized life, or how to live an actualized life, I should say. Let's start with just taking a sort of a baseline. Where are we in our individual lives? I'm going to ask you a question, and what I want you to do is play along in this game. And you may have immediately some feedback. Well, Mark, what do you mean by that? I want you to rate your life on a scale of 1 to 10 of how good it is. Are you at the baseline of good? Is your life good? 1 to 10. 1 to 10. And so a number should pop into your mind. You can do fractions of numbers if you want. That's always kind of a question when you throw it. Can I do 7.3? And this is it's all within your own awareness. So you're not sharing this with anybody. So you can come up with any kind of number you want. The only thing I would kind of encourage you to do is not go, well, I'm at 12. I'm a religious scientist and I've had good thoughts, and I transcend your even scale of 10ness. And I would invite you to say, okay, well, put yourself maybe at a 9.8 if that's where you are, because there's always room for recognizing that there's something more that you can manifest into your lives. So what's your number? Just hold that number in your mind. You got it? Everybody got it? So now I want to take that number and parse it, because where you may have come back and said, oh, it's a 7, it's an 8, or it's a 7.5. I'm going to give you 5 categories of your life that I want you to look at real quickly and say, where is that area? And if you could come up with a number, it would be great. But if nothing else, compare it against that first number. Is it below your overall goodness score, or is it above it? So the first area is your life, your body, your physical form, your health. If you had to rate the good in your body, your diet, your exercise, anything in terms of health, the physical form that you have, if you were to rate your life, where would that be? Rate that body. Got a number? If nothing else, again, below or above your average. Second area, where's your sense of security in terms of finances in your house, and that life of just feeling like I'm secure in my life? Is there, are you overspending your budget, or do you have extra money at the end of the month? Do you feel like you could have more money flowing into your life, or you feel like you're already, wealthy and abundant and you don't need any more in that life? Where would your number be in that sort of like security aspect? If you enjoy your house where you're living and all of that nature of finances and place of residence. Got a number? All right. Third, your relationships with other people. What's your relation? Do you have good friends? Do you have people that you can connect with and discuss things that are important to you? Do you have love in your life through these relationships? Do you have a sense of connectedness with other people? Where's your personal score in that? Okay. Got it? Got a number? Fourth number. We're going to do 5. I'm parsing the one general number down to 5. That's where I'm going here. The fourth area is, what's your relationship with you and the world? Meaning, are you expressing your talents and abilities? Do you feel like you are seen as somebody who's valid and worthy? Do you have a sense of self-worth in the world? As you interact with other people, do you feel like your talents and abilities are being appreciated? Are you bringing to the planet what you thought that you were going to bring to the planet in terms of who you are? Got a score? Now, the fifth and final one is, how are you on your relationship to the greater transcendent nature of life? What the hell does he mean by that? What's your relationship in your spiritual path with God, with the divine, with spirit? What is your relationship with Gaia, with the world? What is your relationship with humanity in general? Do you have a sense of your place of being in this greater transcendent aspect of yourself? If you were to look at yourself as an individual in a relationship with something greater and grander beyond you, how is your life rated? Would you rate your goodness in that? Okay. Now, it would be hard to hang on to all those numbers in your mind, but I want you to focus on for a moment is, again, that first number was, how good is your life? We're on a scale of 1 to 10. And the others, you may say, well, it was above or below that. And if you know which ones, if you at least can remember which ones were above and which ones were below your overall average, that gives you sort of a sense of a starting point of saying, where is there something perhaps I need to look at and work on? We'll come back to this later. Let's just sort of like set that on the shelf for a moment. What we're looking at today is living an actualized life. Now, for me, when I hear that phrase, the first thing comes up for me as I go back to my days as an undergraduate student getting a degree in psychology and studying the psychologists of that time who were important. And some of them bored me, the B.F. Skinners and the behavioralists and all of that stuff. I felt like it didn't really relate as much. And there was too much emphasis on abnormal psychology. I was interested in the higher states of human consciousness and where we could develop and grow into our higher states of who we could be. And there was a budding movement when I was in my undergraduate days of people who were looking at this particular question of the higher potential of humans. One of them, of course, was Abraham Maslow. Most of us know Maslow. We've all know Maslow's hierarchy, the hierarchy of needs. And we're actually going to go through that for a moment because I think it's good just to refresh it in our minds in relation to this topic of living an actualized life. But it was Maslow who created, or at least popularized, the term of self-actualization. And it was a concept that was to say that at the certain higher levels of potential within humans were a motivation for us to desire something beyond the norms of our physical life and our physical interactions with the world, and that we were driven by these higher things. Now, Maslow created what he called a sort of motivation scale. It's what motivates humans to make decisions. And in his hierarchy, which we all know the pyramid, if you've studied, and just an aside, he didn't create the pyramid. People took his model and made the pyramid. That was not his creation. What he actually said was he generalized when he looked at people's motivators. The things that motivated them fell into categories. There were physical needs, air, food, water, etc. Then there were safety and security needs, shelter, level income, feeling that I live in a safe environment. I'm not going to get attacked, so I have safety needs. There were needs above that, love and belongingness. How am I fitting in with a group? Do I have a significant other, or am I getting love in my life? The fourth one was self-esteem. How do I feel about myself in the world, in my relationship to everything else? these 4 levels, and then the 5th level he came up with, which was the tip of his pyramid, was called self-actualization. And I'll come back to that in a moment. What he recognized is that we tend to have to fill most of the needs at the lower levels before we can move to the higher levels. So we have to have our basic physical needs met before we can move up to things. I'm not going to worry about my self-esteem if I, don't have any food to eat. I'm not going to be worried about love and belonging necessarily if I'm homeless and living on the street and don't have a sense of security. And so although the levels are a little bit fluid, they're not rigid levels, we can sort of look at it that we have to meet certain needs before we can move to the higher needs. And I think we can see that in our lives, is that we can be flying along and feeling like everything is wonderful, and then we get hit with an illness, and we're back in our physical needs and having to deal with the physical stuff going on before we can get back to feeling like we can focus on higher stuff. We have a death or a loss in our family, and that's going to knock us off. And all of a sudden, we have to somehow deal through the grief issues of that and get a sense of closure and completeness before we can move back into looking at higher stuff in our lives. So Maslow's model, makes a lot of good logical sense to me, and it's always guided me for much of my life. But the tip of that pyramid, self-actualization, is where we're focused on today. If we're talking about living an actualized life, we're talking about living the kind of characteristics that he felt like were the tip of the pyramid. And what are some of the characteristics of being a self-actualized individual? Let me say it properly. Self-actualization, if you go out and research it online, you're going to find tons of writing, tons of people, Maslow and others, have studied this aspect of humanity and defined many, many characteristics of what it means to be a self-actualized person. I'm going to give you 5 over the next few minutes. And the first one relates to the fact that you have experiences that are peak experiences, or you're in the flow. Are there moments in your life when you feel like sort of time stops and you're so in the moment with whatever it is that you're doing that experience just transcends time and the human experience in the physical world? Now, we see this in a lot with sports people who get runners who get into that flow running. Many people who are professional sports athletes will talk about being in the flow of life. We can also do it in states of meditation, I feel, as well, as we can get into the flow. I think even in moments of public speaking, like right now, many times that I can get in the flow by being in front of a group and talking. But there is an aspect of life when we know that we've sort of set our busyness of our mind aside and gotten into life at such a level that it's just naturally feel like it's flowing through us and that everything is working perfectly in that moment. And all of us can experience this from time to time. And this is one of the aspects of living an actualized life, is to be in those flow peak moments. Now, where are they in your life? If you think back and when you've experienced them, I'd invite you to consider, when in your life have you found peak moments? And what does that say to you about maybe what's yours to do in life? Okay, so peak moments are one aspect of an actualized life. The second one that I want to point out is that there is a level of what we call acceptance. Now, acceptance means, and it's sort of like if you think of like the 12-step program and the serenity prayer, and the aspect of the purpose of that prayer is to be able to have the wisdom to know the difference between the things I can change and the things I can't change. And for the things that I can change, that I take appropriate action. And for the things that I can't change, to have a level of acceptance. I don't want to call it resignation, because resignation has the connotation that we're, sort of given up. And we feel defeated by it. Acceptance has a different feeling to it. Acceptance is to look out at life and to recognize there are things out there that maybe I can have some minute impact on. Maybe in that scheme of chaos theory that we discussed last week, that I can be the butterfly that makes a little change here that hopefully will impact that. But at the same time, I have to be okay with the fact that what I view out there in the world that bothers me, and it can be in my life as well, if I don't have any control over it, as long as I'm pushing against that, I'm not going to be living an actualized life. As long as I'm resisting that aspect, I have to come to a level of acceptance of it. So what is it right now, perhaps, that you feel like you're resisting, that you have no control over and you need to accept? I know for me, sometimes I look at the life and, how we're treating the planet, the income inequality, the political divisiveness, things of that nature that I feel, on some regards, maybe I have minute ways I can navigate around the edges and have an impact. But at the same time, I feel like there's things about that if I want to dwell on them and get upset, that's one choice I can make. Or I can have sort of an inner acceptance that that's going to play out the way it needs to play out in life, and I don't have any control over it. And by that level of acceptance, it lets me allow that aspect of life to be. And I'm not spending so much of my mental coin on focusing upon it. So that's another second characteristic. A third characteristic of living an actualized life is to have what's called gratitude or an appreciation. Appreciation means I go through this life with a high level of appreciation for what I have. Okay, so I've accepted the things before I just mentioned that I can't change, but this now comes to a level where I have gratitude and appreciation for the things that I have. And I can look out at the prosperity of my life. I can look out at the fact that I live on that Goldilocks planet with the right temperatures and water and air and all the goodness of being able to live in the physical form as a human being, that there's great gifts in that. And do I have appreciation for it? Do I have appreciation for my friends and family? Do I have appreciation for, the house that I live in? Do I have appreciation for my spiritual community? Do I have appreciation for my health and vitality? All those areas of my life, am I in appreciation, or do I just simply take them for granted? And it's easy to take them for granted and focus on the things that we have lack in. But let's also take time, and this is what a self-actualized person does, is to appreciate the things they have, that aspect of their life. So that's the third. The fourth is a characteristic that I want to focus on, is that people who are self-actualizing have a purpose in life, that they've answered that question of what is the meaning of my life, what is mine to do that I am here in this form as a human being. What am I called to do and express in this particular lifetime? Now, a lot of times we float through life and say life has no meaning, I don't know what my purpose is, et cetera, et cetera. But I would encourage you, if you don't feel like you know your purpose, to take some steps to try to find what is your purpose in life. Now, how can you go about doing that? Well, there's lots of ways. In fact, this is a shameless plug for my first book, which was called Be Yourself, Evolving the World Through Personal Empowerment. Half that book was about techniques and tools to find your purpose. And I'll simply say a lot of them were looking at the patterns of your inner thoughts and things that keep coming up for you. And a lot of them are looking at the patterns of outer life and things that keep coming up for you, and looking for what life keeps throwing you from an inner or an outer standpoint, and recognizing that your life tends to keep directing you towards something. Now, if you need help, there's lots of YouTube videos, there's lots of books. Mine's just one of many, many. There's classes that are offered here and at CSL Denver and other communities that help you design a process of looking at your life and what is yours to do and be in life. If you're really looking for these higher levels, again, we're talking about going from good to great to grand, it's all of this stuff and one more that I want to highlight for you today. And that is, people who self-actualize look at life as a journey. A lot of times we think we arrive at a certain place. People who are in these higher states of awareness know it's never an arrival. It's a continuous unfolding. It's like a spiral that we're turning upward and going higher and higher levels in our life. We look at our life as like an evolutionary journey where, yes, we may accomplish something and we can look back at our lives and say, look how much I've done. But where I am is just the next step on the next place I'm going. And so that as long as I continue looking at my life as this upward journey that I have deep appreciation for, that I have deep acceptance for the things I can't change, that I allow myself to be in the flow of the process and allow myself to, what is mine to bring into this through my purpose, that I start moving into this sense of living a self-actualized life. Okay. Now, one of the, when I think of Maslow and his hierarchy, I also have to recognize Maslow continued writing. We all know that pyramid that I outlined with the 5 steps and so forth. But what a lot of people don't know was that later in his life, as he was part of this human potential movement in the 60s and 70s, his later writings looked at even higher levels of human potential. He looked at his original hierarchy of categories, and he implemented a couple of extra categories and some other thoughts relative to how this hierarchical nature of life worked in his mind. One I want to recognize is that he later came up with a higher level on his pyramid than self-actualization, and this was called self-transcendence. Self-transcendence. And now what did he mean by that? He's getting at that aspect that there's also a motivation in us to transcend these physical forms, to transcend this sense of me as this person, Mark, standing before you, to see myself in connection with humanity in general, the planet, and whatever the divine or God or spirit is in my awareness. That there is something in me that calls me. Now, again, I got to meet all those basic human stuff as I navigate around in physical life. But as soon as I can meet most of that, there's a direction and focus that moves us to those higher levels. So have something in your life that's focused on self-transcendence? If not, maybe there's a movement there in terms of you going from good to great to grand. The other thing that Maslow recognized in his later writings was that he could categorize all of these categories of needs that we have into two basic needs. There was the lower levels, physical, safety, security, love and belonging, self-esteem. They all fell into what he recognized were deficiency needs. What do I mean by that? It means that we look out at life and we want this and we've got this. There is a different level and we see a gap between our desired state and what we're experiencing. Hence the deficiency, and we're motivated to fill that deficiency in our lives. So much of our lower level moving up to the state of goodness is about finding where we've got gaps in our life between our desired state and our experienced state so that we can fill the gap and then be free to move to the higher levels. The other higher needs, self-actualization, self-transcendence, he called them being needs. What do you mean by that? He meant that we were so full of ourself and our sense of being as a human being that we were called to give from our nature outward. The lower needs were about bringing out in to fill the gap. The higher needs were from feeling from fullness to give to the world. And that sense of being. And so as we move from this path, this evolutionary path in us, this journey to these higher levels of being, we're called to fill the gaps and deficiencies that we see within our life and move upward into higher states where we give to the world through who we are. Now, one aspect of I want to bring into this conversation, because when I think about Maslow and how he sort of changed later in his career to add this other stuff in, it makes me think of another popular writer that many of us know that wrote a book called The 7 Habits of Highly Effective People. We've all heard of this book. Stephen Covey, a very influential business teacher and writer back in the 80s and 90s and early 2000s before he passed. And his mega bestseller was a book called The 7 Habits of Highly Effective People. I want you to focus on that word effective. Effective sort of connotates living in this physical world. But it was a Bible to me when I was going through my secular career as a government leader. I used that book to help guide me to do the right actions in terms of leading teams and so forth. And in most of that book, it's a lot of it, words have come into the common vernacular. We know, put first things first, begin with the end in mind, seek first to understand, then to be understood. These are concepts that all came through that book by Covey. Now, Covey's idea, how he came about the seven habits of highly effective people, was he went out and studied business leaders of the day and looked for the common characteristics that were in them, and then brought them in, coalesced them into a book of 7 habits. Now, that's an interesting idea, what he did, but it's not unique to him, because there's somebody about 50 or 60 years ago, but before him, that did that very similar thing. There was a guy by the name of Napoleon Hill who wrote a book called Think and Grow Rich. Most of us have heard of that book. what Napoleon Hill did was he went out and looked at the business titans of his day in the early days of the 20th century and asked them how they got to be so effective and important and rich. And then he wrote a book looking at the characteristics of these rich people. Sounds like it's focusing only on money, but if you go back and look at that book, Napoleon Hill was actually a New Thought writer. He was very much influenced by New Thought concepts like science of mind and other similar principles. And there's very much spirituality in Think and Grow Rich. It's not about growing rich in money only, which is where many people use the book, but he's also talking about richness in life, which again is going from good to great to grand. Now back to Covey. Covey evolved just like Maslow did. Covey went on to write other books, but he only wrote one sequel to his bestseller. The one sequel was called The Eighth Habit, From Effectiveness to Greatness. Effectiveness to greatness. And he threw another habit in that said that's going to kick it up a notch. And what was that habit? He said the habit that he felt would take us from effectiveness to greatness was to find your voice and to help others find theirs. Now, what is that? What does voice mean? It's not singing and talking. It's finding your unique characteristics of you as a human being living this life. What is unique and valuable and important about you in this lifetime that is different from everyone else, that is a gift within you that's being called forth to express through you? It very much relates to that purpose thing I was talking about a moment ago. But it's a sense of finding your gift in life, and not only finding it, to then give it outward and to walk around and help everybody else find their gifts as well. It's not about me alone, it's about us together. Greatness is really about working together. It's transcending myself as an individual and working with others as well. Okay. So both of these writers really and have offered us some thoughts about moving to this state of grandness. And I just want to paint one visual with you before we move into a few practical thoughts in closing. I want to give you a visual that I'm going to call it the three-layered cake. Three-layered cake. So I want you to visualize the three-layered cake. The first layer, bottom layer, it's this physical form. It's the material world. It's all this stuff that we are navigating around in. This life, this physical life. So when we say that we're human beings, we're having this human experience, that's the human experience that's down here in this lower level of the cake. Middle level of the cake, call that the mental realm. That's where we live a lot of our times. We're in our thoughts, judging and making decisions about the lower level of the cake. Okay. We're hoping that we can institute new thoughts into the middle layer of the cake so we can change the outcomes in the lower level of the cake. And that's what we teach a lot in our classes. But what's the higher level? Above the top level, the third level, is our spiritual nature. And so we sit in the middle layer of the cake in our minds, focusing on the lower level of the cake. And when we're doing that, we're trying to get good, seeking good in that cake, that lower level of the cake. Do you follow me on this? But can we turn our minds and attention, that middle layer in our minds and mental level, to the higher level of the cake? Can we turn it up to the spirit and see how all the three layers connect together? Can we begin to direct our lives through the content and information we receive through intuition and other sources from the higher level to help guide ourselves into how we interact with the lower level? So we see your life today in this week as a three-layer cake. And know that within the realm of the mental, in the middle, you can either look at your attention upward and see the grand and glorious way in which it's all working together for your life, or you can look at the lower level and focus on the negativity and the gaps and not call it good. So how can we use all this craziness I've been throwing at you for the last few minutes to actually benefit your life, to actually help you in moving from goodness to greatness to grandness? How can you actually? Well, first we have to recognize where we are. And back at the beginning of this talk, we took a score and we looked at the areas of our life. And there was a score, and there were some scores that maybe you felt like were below the average, and you have an area to look at. So my question is to look at those areas where maybe you feel like they're not yet level at a baseline of good yet. And then ask yourself two things about those areas of your life, whatever they are for you, whatever is causing you pain or you're feeling the gap between what you desire and what you want. The first question is can I change it? Do I have any control over it? If not, move to acceptance of it. Shift it in your awareness to just accept that's something that's going to have to play out and I've got no control over it. And in that acceptance, you'll move up and see your life a little bit better. You'll come to a sense of appreciation. It may not be what you're desiring in life, but by accepting it, you can come to appreciate it. That's the first question. Again, if there's the gap, can I change it? If the answer is yes, then what's holding you back? Use the power of your thoughts and conscious thoughts, followed by the power of your actions to change it. Look at those levels of your life, the physical, the safety, security, because again, those categories I had you score were roughly Maslow's steps if you didn't figure that out. But look at your physical life and your safety and security and your love and belongingness areas of your life, and look at your relationship to how you feel important in relation to the world. And if there's areas there that are less than, either accept them or change them. And then that moves you to a state of good. Then you can look at your life from a baseline goodness, and we can start working on these higher levels of grand and great, which sound very nebulous. But how do we do it? Well, let's start employing some of these concepts we're talking about. Looking at life as a journey. Do you see that you just have to attain something and you stop? Or do you see the ever-processing evolution of your life? Do you recognize that you're a spiritual being moving through a human experience so that you can learn and grow and become the highest version of yourself that you can? So life is a journey. I've already talked about building in acceptance and appreciation for life. Seek out those peak experiences. Seek out what it is in your life that makes you feel like you are in the flow. In the flow, where the transcendent nature of the God or Spirit is moving through you. If you take any of our classes here, you know we talk about changing our consciousness from life being done to us, we're victims, to being done by us, we have a sense of control, to life being done through us. And that's that flow that we're seeking at the higher levels of our being, until we can actually transcend everything and see that life is done as us, that we are part of the one Spirit that is life. So take the characteristics of living an actualized life and move them into your life. Move yourself up to the base level of goodness by looking at where there's less than. And then turn your attention, as you're sitting in the middle level of that 3-layer cake, away from, look down at life and appreciate it. Look down on the lower level and say, it is good. And then turn your attention and focus up to Spirit and God and oneness and say, let's make it great. And let's just imagine the world that we could live in if everyone, a significant number of us, could shift our focus up in recognizing the divine within us, and that we're all one, that we're all here to give our gifts and live our life on purpose, and to help everybody else do the same. So let's pray. So as we move inward, let's do so with a sense of God is flowing through us as us. There is only this one life, one power, one divine essence. It's expressing in so many, 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 many ways, and that includes each and every one of us here in the room, watching online, watching the video, and those who are not with us. Everything is expressing as God, expressing as that individual unique thing. Every one of the expressions of the divine is moving through its own challenge of life and searching for a state of goodness in their own life. But we know that goodness is not an arrival, that it's a continuous journey upward as we return to a remembrance of the truth of the divine within us, that we are like those Buddhist bodhisattvas who learn and grow and know and then bring back our truth to others, that we have a supportive role in the oneness to help each other find their gifts and talents, to to find their truth and to live their fullest life. So we start where we are in our lives right now. Wherever we are, we know that goodness is prevailing, that we're lifting our consciousness to higher levels, and we're seeing the divinity in all, and we're taking through our power of free choice and free will and our ability to change things that we can change to make this a world that works for everybody. We know this is good. We know this is good. We feel thankful for these lives. We have gratitude for all it is. And we'll release these words into the law, knowing they're so. And so it is. Amen.